sort of what led to all of this. Of course, the death of George Floyd and the frustration over that, and the frustration that there hasn't been more arrests in that case, and the frustration that the one officer that was arrested was only charged with third-degree murder. These protesters feel like if they were in that same situation and they weren't a police officer, they would be charged with first-degree murder for that.
So let's go back to Rick Lozano, who's there on the ground. Rick, what time did the protest start there? Because we've seen different times. For example, we were in Westwood earlier this afternoon, then in Van Nuys as well. Riverside's quieted down, but here this is kind of more energy here. So what time did this start?
Well, it was supposed to start at 8 o'clock directly, but it didn't start until just before we went on the air with you a few minutes ago. At least it didn't start in earnest until that time. For the most part of the evening, most of these protesters had been on the opposite side of the street, yelling at police from a vantage point off the street. And then all of a sudden they decided to rush the street and begin dancing on the police skirmish line. And at first they were a good 50 feet away from them, and they kept creeping closer and closer to the officers and the deputies. And then finally at one point, a sergeant from Costa Mesa PD pulled one of the leaders of this protest group aside and said, listen, we're okay with whatever you do. You're technically in violation of the curfew that began at 7 p.m., but we're going to ignore that. Just don't advance any further. Now, to their credit, they haven't advanced any further since last we talked to you. And so for now, things are okay. The chants continue, the insults continue to be hurled in the direction of law enforcement officers, but they've held their ground. They haven't advanced any further. But I got to tell you that when law enforcement spoke to these people, they were very stern in the warning they gave them. They said, do not come any closer. That's all I'm going to say. That's what the officer said. I'm quoting him directly. He said, I'm going to tell you, do not advance any further. That's all I'm going to say. And that implied that if you do, there are going to be consequences. Luckily, to this point anyway, there have been no consequences. Again, we're going to be here through the course of the night and keeping you posted as to how things develop here.
And I'm wondering, Rick, behind the Costa Mesa officers, is that SWAT team? They don't have National Guard there, correct?
From what I can tell, it's SWAT. I haven't seen any National Guard men or women here. It appears that is a SWAT team from the County Sheriff's Department.
All right, Rick, we're going to stay on top of this situation. Obviously, it is an active live situation that we'll follow for the rest of the night. We want to show you some of the other areas where we have seen activity tonight, including in the Hollywood area. There was active looting a little earlier today. We want to show you some of that video. This is the Gower Gulch, a place you're familiar with, Christine. And check out what happened. This was at the Rite Aid store when we were live on the air. You see people trying to loot that. They broke through the window, and there was just a large swarm of people that started running into that Rite Aid, and a bunch of cars showed up that clearly they had coordinated with so that they could make a quick getaway. The difference between tonight and last night, Christine, is last night this sort of looting would have probably lasted for a half hour, 45 minutes. Tonight it only lasted for a few minutes before the cops were able to show up.
Yeah, this is Sunset near the 101 freeway, and we saw it when we had this shot on the door. You could tell when they made entry to the store itself, because then the crowd just rushed in. And you're right, we've seen in past days where they've been able to go in 2 and 3 times to load up their vehicles with clothing and items that they've taken. That wasn't really the scene here. LAPD, who had been, not too far away on Hollywood Boulevard, able to quickly make their way to this location in force. And you could see when the crowd realized that LAPD was there indeed. But also law enforcement getting a better idea as to the kinds of stores that are being hit. Look there, the businesses there, the restaurants there being boarded up, having been boarded up there, anticipating crowds perhaps. So watch here as people are piling out of the store. You can see them get wind perhaps that LAPD was very close. But like I said, with law enforcement now getting a feel for the kinds of stores that were being hit. They've been kind of keeping an eye and ear on some of these stores and trying to also stop those cars making the getaway.
And we look at these folks, it looks like it's a whole lot of young people, most of them in, many of them in sweatshirts, most of them wearing masks because of coronavirus, but it makes it, of course, harder to identify who they are. They try to sort of get as much as they can and get out of there as quickly as they can.
Yeah, we also talked about, though, law enforcement being able to try to stop some of the cars that have been, they call it the mobile looting, that they've been able to try to go to location. And we've seen a couple of arrests tonight where they've been able to track some of these cars down or stop them as they've been making their getaway. But watch here. So that's the side street where you see some of the cars where they're just kind of 2 and 3 friends are just piling into the cars with they've been able to take.
So their cars are ready to go, the sort of getaway car that they have stacked. They throw as much stuff as they can, and then they start moving. You see, they're even moving before the doors close. Other people start moving here. You wonder how many of those people were impacted, if all of them were involved, or some of them might just be innocent bystanders who got stuck on the street. And here you see it, the LAPD moving in force. This guy, one of the last guys to get out, they keep running. Now the LAPD moves in, and that looting was over at that store. But we saw multiple different places in the Hollywood area that were looted tonight.
We also heard from the LAPD chief about the number of arrests that they've been able to make as well. So it's certainly one of those interesting situations where when you talk to why people are doing this, Bill Malugin talked to one young man who came from another county over to L.A. He said, I just wanted to get the loot. Well, he got caught, and he was sitting there on the corner in handcuffs there as Bill talked to him.
There is a bit of good news, though. There was a lot of concern as we look at this picture from Costa Mesa. A lot of concern tonight in the San Fernando Valley because there were news about the protests in Van Nuys. There was news about potential protests I heard in Encino, Sherman Oaks. A lot of that was trending on Twitter earlier today. There was thoughts that area could be targeted. We have not seen reports of mass looting in those areas. There was concern about Westwood because we had a big protest there. The protesters went onto the freeway. Thankfully, that protest was peaceful. We heard that the National Guard was in Westwood guarding the village there. I know there was a lot of concern in the Brentwood neighborhood. Almost the entire street of San Vicente was boarded up. Concerns that Westwood protest would descend over there towards the Brentwood neighborhood. Thankfully, no reports of looting in that neighborhood. So a lot of these neighborhoods that were concerned, that did proactive measures tonight, breathing a sigh of relief that they have not been hit by the looting that we saw last night in Santa Monica and Long Beach.
We were watching this live picture here in Costa Mesa where if you were to go there minutes ago, you'd hear this crowd chanting. Now it seems to be much more of a calm there as they continue to protest there. But so many there on the ground, they're sitting there quietly exercising the normal right to protest except for a curfew. So this protest starting, I guess Rick Lozano said around 8 p.m. That is past the 7 p.m. curfew there, but watching what's happening there.
But that's another neighborhood we should point out, though. There's been a lot of concern all day long about protests in Costa Mesa, and that could potentially lead to looting or problems in Orange County. And thankfully, we haven't heard any of those problems. Rick Lozano, it looks like you have a guest there. Why don't you take it away?
Yeah, I do indeed. Let me get your name first of all.
Rashawn Burns.
So, Rashawn, you've been here since the very beginning, even before this crowd began to assemble.
Yes, sir.
What role are you trying to play with them? Because I've seen you up there trying to negotiate whatever it is that's going on between the crowd and police.
I was actually just taking photos. I have a first aid kit in my backpack in case anybody got hurt. I didn't come to play any role other than documenter and photographer.
Well, you seem to have fallen into that role.
Yeah.
And what is the attitude of the crowd here, and what's the intent?
They're angry, but they're peaceful, and they want to communicate that what happened isn't okay. And I was hoping that maybe we could, both sides, come to some sort of peaceful coalition. I personally think that's the goal, and I think that's the goal everywhere. That is with reforms in the police, system, but we'll see.
The crowd advanced twice on this skirmish line, and that's when the sergeant said in no uncertain terms, do not advance any further. And they haven't, to their credit, but still the message has been delivered by law enforcement.
Yes. So we try. They asked us if we can take a couple steps back and maybe we can come to some sort of agreement. But the crowd knows through what's been shown in the past couple weeks, maybe not to trust cops. We'll see.
So you realize that there is a curfew in effect at this moment. Technically, all these people are in violation of that. Do you give law enforcement here tonight credit for at least not citing you on any of that? At least not yet.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that it's within their legal right to set an ordinance. For the curfew, that is. I don't necessarily agree with doing it to prevent a protest. I do with the looting. So I do give them their props for allowing us to peacefully assemble. It is our constitutional right, however, so if they were to prevent that, I wouldn't. I'd do the exact opposite of giving them credit.
All right. Gino, turn around over here. I'm going to try to walk up here and talk to the sergeant who's been mediating on behalf of these folks, and he's talking to one of the young ladies who has been sort of negotiating back and forth between the crowd and law enforcement. And as soon as she has a quick break here, I'm going to try to step in. Excuse me, let me just try to sneak in a quick question.
Have the conversation first, please? I would appreciate it.
Absolutely. You go ahead. That's fine. You go ahead and take care of your business, and then we'll try to step in for a quick question or two. But we've got a higher vantage point from here, and you can see the size of the crowd. And I'm guessing maybe 150 to 200 people who are assembled here, and they've been slowly trickling in through the course of the evening. And again, technically, all of them are in violation of the curfew order, but so far, no arrests, no citations have been handed out. As soon as this officer breaks free, we're going to try to engage him in conversation, but for now, we're going to send it back to you, Alex.
All right, Rick, thank you so much, and we will get back to Rick, and this is usually the time of night where we join you. A very special edition of the Fox 11 News at 10 starts right now.
They're protecting the stores. Our looters are over there.
It happened live on Fox 11. Community members fight back trying to stop looters, but one innocent woman winds up in handcuffs.
Watch out, there's fireworks.
Protesters face off with police in Riverside.
And we're all trying to show that this is the land of the free. We're all able to do anything. We can be with whoever we want. We can do whatever we want.
The sheriff took a knee with protesters to start a conversation. That moment right there, the sheriff taking a knee in Riverside with protesters. Good evening, everyone. I'm Christine Devine. We welcome you to the Fox 11 News at 10 o'clock.
And I'm Alex Michelson. It's been a day of peaceful protests and then a night of chaos in certain areas. Curfews in effect now all around Southern California, most until 6 o'clock tomorrow morning. Protests beginning peaceful in Riverside, but turning violent when protesters threw some fireworks at sheriff's deputies.
We saw several incidents of looting in Van Nuys and Hollywood, but we also saw a quick response by the LAPD to take suspects into custody. We want to remind you that we will continue our coverage of LA in crisis tomorrow morning, very early, 4 a.m., right here on Good Day LA. Our Christina Gonzalez has been in the middle of it all in Van Nuys all day.
Yeah, we've seen protests morph into looting, that morphed into standoff. Christina, what a day you had, what a night you had, and you were in the middle of some incredible events. Take it away.
Yeah. Well, thank you. What a night all of us in the Southland have had. And the latest incident before we show you some of the stuff from today is we are at the Walgreens, which is on Sherman Way in Van Nuys, and looters tried to get in there. Quick response by law enforcement and people from the community who actually tried to block them. Just one of the many times today when that has happened, including this one incident at a liquor store where we ended up in the middle of a showdown. Let's just show you. Monette is the one who's going to narrate this. She is one of the people, the residents, who tried to help the business owner, stopped some people who were seemingly, allegedly about to start looting again. Do listen. This vehicle and those guys over there got out of the other vehicle. There's a gold store in the parking lot, and they were heading to it. And these guys came out and they said, "No, you're not." And he's with us. They're having a standoff here, arguing about why they're not being allowed to break into the place.
They were going after the gold store, but being that me and my family were out in the front with the owner to the liquor store, they just wanted to jump out the car, and they wanted to harass me because I was talking a lot of stuff. And I just turned around and said, we're not doing that. We're not tearing up nothing over here. I was flagging down the police with the owner and was asking, can you guys help?
All right, here they come. Over, and then from your perspective, what happened?
I was handcuffed, thrown up against a wall with my husband, my brother-in-law, and I'm just like, the hell? The news people are here. They're telling you it's not her.
They're putting this lady in handcuffs. I've just told them.
And then the owner of the store was like, no, it's not them. You know, they're helping us. They're helping protecting our store. Then they let us go. But then my son and my daughter, somebody called them and said, your mom is on TV. And they pulled up in the middle of the street, and I'm looking at them like, okay, here we go. I understand the protest. I understand what this is about. I get it. I understand that. I'm fighting for the same protest. But what we not going to do is we don't want other people from different cities to come and tear up where we live at, because we have to rebuild this. We did this once before.
And what she is referring to, of course, what she's referring to is 1993, the LA riots back then. Now, when we come back at 10:30, we're going to let her talk a little bit more about her thoughts about what's going on this time and possibly what's going to need to be done. A shout out to her. She is a wonderful lady. She and her family are fine. They did let them go. The misunderstanding. And, of course, an amazing shout out to my camera person, Joe Prince, who has done an incredible job all day. And to all the people in the city who are living this with all of us. Thank you for your support. I am live in Van Nuys, where we do have a curfew, and officers are asking people to stay home. Keep that in mind. I'm Christina Gonzalez. Back to you guys.
Christina, one of the great joys and privileges of reporting in the field is you get an opportunity to meet new people every day. But every once in a while, you meet somebody that stands out that you'll sort of remember for the rest of your